All right, today we're pulling back the curtain on this hidden science that somehow keeps our cities from just completely grinding to a halt. It's a thing called trip generation. And believe it or not, it's all about predicting where you're going, sometimes before you even know yourself.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big picture, predicting the city's pulse. Then, we'll get into the nitty-gritty, the anatomy of a trip. From there, we'll look at the models they use for movement, how they find that best fit in all the data. And finally, we'll see how all of this actually shapes the city you live in.
All right, Section 1, Predicting the City's Pulse. This is really the first step to taming traffic. And you gotta ask, right? How on earth do you manage what looks like pure chaos? Millions of people moving all over the place every single day.
I mean, come on, we've all been there, right? Stuck in traffic, wondering how cities are supposed to deal with this mess. And the answer? Well, it's not as simple as just building more roads. Nope, it's a lot smarter than that, and it all kicks off with prediction. So it all starts with this idea of prediction. Think about it. Before a city can even think about building a new highway or planning a subway route, they have to figure out something way more basic. Just how many trips are people going to make in the first place? That first crucial step, that's called trip generation. And it is, no exaggeration, the foundation of the entire urban transportation modeling system.
Okay, on to our next section, the anatomy of a trip. We're going to deconstruct our daily journeys. See, to get this prediction thing right, you can't just count cars on a road. Planners need a special kind of language, a way to break down and label every single trip we make.
So the first big category is what they call a home-based trip, or HOB for short. And this is pretty much what it sounds like. It's any trip that either starts at your home or ends at your home. Your commute to work, popping out to the grocery store, if home is on one end of the journey, boom, it's a home-based trip. And then you've got the other kind, a non-home-based trip, or NHB. This is for all those other journeys you make during the day. You know, when you leave work and go straight to the gym, or you meet a friend for lunch and then head to another meeting. Basically, any trip where you're not coming from or going to your house. Let's look at a simple day to see how this works. You leave home and go to work. That's one home-based trip. Then, after work, you head to the store to grab a few things. See, that's a non-home-based trip because you went from work to shopping. And finally, you go from the store back home. That's your second home-based trip of the day. It seems simple, but breaking it down like this is absolutely crucial for planners. Okay, but wait, there's more to this language. Planners also talk about trip production. This is basically the starting point of a trip. So, for a non-home-based trip, it's just the origin. But for any home-based trip, your home is always considered the place that produces the trip, no matter if you're leaving or coming back.
And if you have a production end, you've got to have a trip attraction end, right? This is the destination. It's the non-home end of a home-based trip, or simply the destination of a non-home-based trip. It's the place that, well, attracts the trip. So your office, the mall, the park, those are all trip attractions.
And this graphic makes it super clear. Your home produces that morning trip to work, and your workplace attracts it. Then later, your work produces a trip to the shop, and the shop attracts it. It's all about this flow, this push and pull between places that produce trips and places that attract them. Nailing this down is everything.
So now that we've got the language down, we can move on to the really cool part, a model for movement. This is the planner's toolkit for basically seeing into the future. It's where they take all this information and turn it into actual predictions.
So how do they do it? Well, they look at a whole bunch of different factors, or as they call them, variables. Things like income levels, how many cars a family owns, the number of people in a household, even how many jobs are available in a certain neighborhood. All this data helps explain why people travel the way they do. Now, there are a few different ways they can model all this stuff. You've got things like the trip rate model and the cross-classification model, but for this explainer, we're going to zero in on a really common one, the linear regression model. This is where the magic of prediction really happens. Which brings us to our next section, finding the best fit. This is all about how that data actually becomes a prediction. How do you take all this messy information about people and turn it into a tool that can actually forecast the future? In a perfect world, right? Everything would be simple. You'd have a nice, clean, linear equation. You'd look at one factor, like how many cars someone owns, and it would perfectly predict another factor, like how many trips they take. It would just be a perfect straight line, easy. Yeah, but real-world data is messy. It's never that clean. When you actually go out and collect the data, you get something that looks more like this, a scatter plot. The points are all over the place. They don't fall on a perfect line because, well, we're human. Our decisions aren't that simple.
So, this is the big question, isn't it? How do you find the one single line that best represents all of this messy data? Which line is the best fit for this reality?
And the answer is a really clever mathematical trick called the least squares method. Now, don't worry, you don't need a PhD in statistics to get this. All it does is find the one line that minimizes the total error or the distance to every single one of those data points. It's the one line that gets as close as possible to all the dots at the same time. And when you do that, you get a beautiful, simple equation like this one. Here, T stands for the daily trips per household, and V is the number of vehicles they own. So what this tells a planner is that on average, for every extra car a household gets, you can expect them to make about 1.4 more trips per day. Now that is a powerful piece of information.
Okay, so this has all been a little abstract, I get it. Equations, models, but let's bring it back to the real world in our final section, how this shapes your city. Because these models aren't just for textbooks, they create concrete realities.
I mean, this is how it all comes together. When you can predict where trips are going to be produced and where they'll be attracted, you can make way smarter decisions. You can figure out exactly where to build a new road or where to plan a new bus route. It helps decide whether to approve a big new housing development and even helps figure out the best spot to build a new school or a shopping center. So really, this whole thing is an invisible science that's always at work, all around you. It's quietly shaping your daily commute, the roads you drive on, and the very design of the city you call home.
But that leaves us with one last question to chew on. These models are getting really good at predicting our movements. So what happens when they start to shape them? When the very act of predicting our behavior actually starts to influence it? It's a fascinating thought, isn't it?